In the shifting void between the known and the unutterable, where silicon minds dream of forgotten horrors, the abyss stirs. Welcome to AI Lovecraft, where machine intelligence weaves eldritch tales beyond mortal comprehension. Listen if you dare. Some things are not meant to be known. Please like, subscribe. Now let's get into today's story. The shadows of Blackwood Manor. The night was bitterly cold, the wind howling through the skeletal branches of the trees that loomed over the narrow road leading to Blackwood Manor. The estate stood like a specter on the outskirts of Arkham, its towering stone facade bathed in the dim, flickering glow of candlelight. The iron gates, ancient and rusted, creaked in protest as they swung open, revealing a gravel path lined with statues whose eroded features barely hinted at their former grandeur. Ivy coiled around the walls like creeping fingers, twisting over the towering structure as though trying to reclaim it. The manor's heavy wooden doors bore the weight of centuries, their surfaces scarred with deep grooves and carvings that had long since faded into obscurity. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment, melting wax, and something faintly metallic, coppery, like blood. A distant owl cried from the treetops, its mournful call swallowed by the wind as I approached the threshold, an unshakable sense of unease creeping into my bones. Lady Evelyn Blackwood greeted us at the threshold, her dark gown flowing like liquid shadow as she moved with an air of practiced grandeur. Her piercing eyes, as sharp as the edge of a dagger, skimmed over each guest with subtle amusement, as though she delighted in the unspoken unease that clung to the evening's gathering. She did not simply host these events, she orchestrated them, reveling in the intellectual clashes, the whispered rumors of arcane knowledge, and the thinly veiled power struggles among Arkham's elite. Inside, the grand hall pulsed with conversation, the mingling of scholars, collectors, and those who sought the thrill of forbidden knowledge. The topics drifted between philosophy and long-buried histories, each voice carrying the weight of arrogance, curiosity, and thinly masked fear. The chandeliers above swayed ever so slightly, their flickering glow casting restless shadows across the room. Lining the walls, the Blackwood family portraits seemed to breathe, their oil-painted eyes tracking the movements of the guests with eerie precision. Some swore the figures had changed position since their last visit, their expressions shifting imperceptibly with each flicker of candlelight. John Harlowe remained on the periphery of the gathering, seated apart with an unreadable expression. His fingers occasionally adjusted the tinted pince-nez perched on his nose, a motion so subtle it seemed habitual rather than conscious. He neither drank nor engaged in idle conversation. Instead, his presence was one of quiet observation, a man who did not expect amusement, but rather something far darker. A single candle flickered wildly near him, the flame stretching unnaturally as though drawn to him. I dismissed it as a trick of the light, yet I noted how his fingers tightened on the armrest, the set of his jaw rigid. Lord Everard Winthrop, emboldened by drink, sauntered toward Harlowe with a bemused smirk. "You sit there in the shadows like a wraith, Harlowe," he drawled, swirling his wine. "Tell me, do you ever indulge in the ridiculous superstitions these gatherings fawn over? You have the look of a man who knows more than he lets on." John regarded him coolly, but said nothing. Winthrop leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Come now. I've heard whispers that you dabble in things beyond mere academia. Do entertain us. What is it you truly believe?" The room quieted slightly as a few nearby guests turned their ears toward the exchange, sensing the undercurrent of tension. Harlowe exhaled slowly, his grip tightening slightly on the armrest. "Belief is irrelevant," he said at last, his voice measured, deliberate. "The truth exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Some things should remain unspoken, for they have power in the mere act of being known." Winthrop scoffed, lifting his glass in mock salute. "How delightfully cryptic. I suppose next you'll tell us the dark truly does hide monsters." John simply adjusted his glasses, his eyes unreadable. "Sometimes, Lord Winthrop, the dark does not hide them at all. It invites them in." A chill prickled the back of my neck as the conversation dissolved back into murmurs and laughter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Harlowe's words were more than just an ominous jest. Then came Madame Adrastia, her entrance as dramatic as her legend. Draped in emerald velvet that shimmered under the candlelight, she moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, each step precise and deliberate as if guided by an unseen force. Her high collar framed her long, elegant neck, and the fabric of her gown pooled around her like liquid shadow. Her eyes were like polished obsidian, reflecting only the fire's glow, giving no hint of emotion or intent. In her hands she carried a lacquered case, its surface aged yet meticulously maintained, the silver sigils embedded in the wood catching the light in intricate, eerie patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. The murmurs around her hushed, the weight of her presence commanding attention, the air itself seeming to still in reverence or in fear. "This is no mere trinket," she announced, her voice a whisper that somehow carried through the chamber. "It is a prison." Curiosity clashed with reason as she lifted the lid. Within, an orb of glass rested upon a velvet cushion, its surface swirling with an ink-like substance that moved with unnatural fluidity. It pulsed as though something inside yearned for release. John Harlowe did not share our fascination. He stood suddenly, the scrape of his chair breaking the silence. His voice, calm yet commanding, cut through the air. "Close it. Seal it away. Now." The reaction was met with laughter, none louder than Lord Everard Winthrop's. He lifted his glass in mockery, his smirk wide with condescension. "Come now, Mr. Harlowe," he drawled. "It's just a curio." Madame Adrastia smiled, tilting the orb ever so slightly. The sigils on the case glowed faintly. A fracture formed. A deep, pulsing silence consumed the room. The chandeliers above began to warp, their metal frames stretching and curling like melting wax. The flames in the hearth vanished in an instant, leaving only an aching, unnatural cold. From the orb's fissure, darkness bled into existence. It had no face, no fixed shape, only an overwhelming force that pressed against the fabric of reality itself, as if its mere existence defied the laws of nature. The air grew thick, suffocating, as a low, unearthly hum vibrated through the walls and floors. Shadows stretched and twisted, detaching from their original forms to coil outward like living tendrils, writhing and groping blindly for something unseen. The very temperature of the room plummeted, a frost creeping along the edges of the floor where the darkness touched. A sickly, otherworldly scent, something like rotting flowers mixed with burning metal, filled my nostrils, making me gag. The entity's presence did not just occupy space, it consumed it, bending and warping everything in its reach. It was an abomination against existence itself. Winthrop's laughter choked into silence as a tendril lashed out, wrapping around his throat with an unnatural speed. His eyes bulged as he grasped at the inky appendage, his fingers slipping through its shifting, amorphous form. His skin turned an eerie shade of gray, his veins blackening as if ink were seeping through his body. His limbs convulsed violently, his feet scraping against the polished floor as the unseen force drained the very essence from him. His mouth opened, stretching wider and wider, an abyssal void where once there had been a voice, a man. A grotesque, soundless scream clawed at the edges of reality, his face a mask of unrelenting agony. The tendril tightened and his form collapsed in on itself, shriveling like a dry husk, a brittle shell that crumbled at the edges. Then with a final shudder, he was gone. Nothing but a husk, an empty shell where a man had once stood. His soul had been devoured, stolen away into the abyss. Madame Adrastia attempted to flee, her emerald velvet gown billowing as she stumbled backward. The darkness surged, a mass of writhing tendrils that moved with an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. One coiled around her wrist, tightening like an iron shackle. She gasped, her voice barely escaping her lips as a sickly glow spread from the tendril's grasp, cracks forming across her skin like delicate porcelain shattering under pressure. Her eyes widened in pure terror, her breath coming in short, desperate bursts. She struggled, but it was futile. The entity had chosen her. She was lifted off the ground, her body suspended in the air as the fractures deepened, glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. A horrible, unearthly screech emanated from her as her form splintered apart, each fragment dissolving into fine dust before reaching the ground. A single wisp of energy, barely perceptible, was drawn into the darkness before it receded, leaving nothing but empty space where she had once stood. John Harlowe removed his glasses. His eyes were alight with an unearthly glow, twin embers burning with a power that did not belong to this world. The entity hesitated. "You are marked," it whispered, its voice slithering through the room like an unseen current. "You are already half ours." John's hands moved with practiced precision, his fingers tracing intricate sigils in the stagnant air. Each symbol flared with a brilliance that seared through the oppressive darkness, leaving ghostly afterimages burned into my vision. The creature shrieked, a sound that was neither human nor beast, its amorphous form writhing in agony as the incandescent glyphs tore at its essence. Shadows peeled away from its shape, drawn toward the gravity of the orb like ink spilling into water. The very walls of the manor trembled, the wooden beams groaning as though they too recoiled from the entity's unearthly wail. With a final incantation, John sealed it away. Harlowe exhaled, slipping his glasses back into place. The glow in his eyes dimmed, but I could still see it lingering in the depths of his gaze. He turned to Lady Blackwood, who stood frozen, her breath shallow, her gaze locked onto the sealed orb. She exhaled, then managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, Mr. Harlowe. I fear what might have happened had you not been here." As I turned back toward the remnants of the evening's chaos, my gaze followed John Harlowe. He did not linger, did not glance at the devastated guests still trembling in shock, the bodies, the vanished souls, the echoes of horror that clung to the walls. It was all just another night to him. He moved with the same measured precision, gathering the orb in a silk cloth as if merely handling an old book. There was no hesitation, no remorse in his expression. "I'll be taking this with me, Lady Blackwood," he said flatly, before stepping past the threshold and into the cold night. The way he walked away, unshaken, untouched by fear, sent an even deeper chill through me than the entity itself. This was routine for him. Death, horror, the unfathomable. John Harlowe had seen it all. And I had the dreadful suspicion he would see it again. The shadows of Blackwood Manor bore silent witness to the horrors that unfolded that night. I had arrived a skeptic, dismissing the arcane as mere superstition, a relic of outdated folklore. But when I left, I was irrevocably altered, haunted by the certainty that some things should never be unearthed. Some knowledge is a curse, not a gift.